All right, guys, I am about to go live with my good friend Adam, and we are going to be talking today about memory and I guess how your brain forms memory and why people develop issues with their memory. I'm just waiting to see here if Adam comes up so I can get him on. So let's take a look. Let's just give him a moment here. But I see people all the time who come to me because they are having problems with their memory. And, people are always terrified that it's something like Alzheimer's. And we do see people develop Alzheimer's often. It's one of the many dementias that people can develop. But sometimes when people have memory issues, it can be something that's a quick fix. And so we'll see how this conversation sort of flows with Adam. I see, there he is. Let me see if I can bring him on.
Oh
There
yeah.
you go.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. I like the headset.
Hey dude, I feel so official right now. I'm like cool headset, hair's looking decent, teeth
Look at
on
that.
point, mustache in full 70s form. I'm ready to talk
Uh,
about memories.
I know, the contrast between the mustache, which seems like it's from the 70s, and the headset, which seems like, it's futuristic.
Dude, I am an enigma wrapped within an enigma. I feel
Yeah.
good. My family went to a Salvador Dali museum this weekend, so I'm trying
My
to.
Listen, my
Oof.
favorite artist,
Is he
and
really?
actually, my since we're going to be talking about memory, my
Memory.
favorite painting is the persistence of memory, followed by the disintegration of the persistence of memory.
Okay, so A, you're much more cultured than I am. B, um, what do those paintings talk about? I mean, what are they called again?
So there's the persistence of memory,
The
um,
persistence of memory. Okay.
persistence of memory, and then there is the other painting, which is the disintegration of the persistence of memory, if I'm remembering that
Wow.
correctly.
That's
Um,
incredible.
but yeah, I can't speak to Dali's what his interpretation of that painting was, what his
Yeah.
process was. Uh, and I haven't looked at the paintings in a while, but
Yeah.
there's the persistence of memory has a bunch of clocks in it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Um, and he is well known for putting faces inside different objects.
Mm-hmm.
And then also with the disintegration of the persistence of memory, you start seeing that painting just start to sort of break down, like things are floating away.
Oh my
And
God.
so it really, gets to the neurology nerd in me because I'm like, oh, this is what people are experiencing when they have memory problems.
I love it. Well, I like the neurology nerd. That is,
Yeah,
there needs to be a t-shirt. If you once you're done with the Brain Fit Institute shirts, the neurology nerd needs to be one of them.
yeah, neuro nerd, right?
Neuro
Yeah,
nerd. That's actually not a bad. I mean, you kind
that's
of
not
just
bad.
can't skate by while doing neurology. You studying, I'm not really into it. I'm not studying too hard right now. It's just something I'm not doing. Kind of need to
Uh,
do it.
yeah,
It's great. Hey, it's great seeing you. First of all, I feel
you
like
too, you too.
we've missed a week here, but I'm loving being back on your live feed. So let's jump into it. Even though it's your live feed, I'm asking you questions because
Yeah.
you're the neurologist. So. I want to talk about memory. I was interviewing someone earlier today and I was asking them about their childhood. I was saying,
Mm.
so ages, you know, 0 to 5, where were you? What was going on? What do you remember? And we got there and we went to 8 to 10 years old. And then she said, oh, something happened. I remember when I was 18 months. And I'm like, wait, do you remember that? Or did somebody tell? So like, before we get into that, like, what is a memory? Where does it live?
Yeah.
How do you catalog it? How does it process it? Like some of the basics on, I'm thinking of it much like a computer when you're filing a system. My sister and I were just having that conversation, so would love to jump in there. What is a
Yeah.
memory? What
Look,
is a memory?
I mean, memories are incredibly important, right? Because they really give us an identity, they give our lives meaning. And so when people are struggling with their memories, it's really disturbing for them, right?
Mm,
And so from a neurological perspective, from a brain perspective, memory is all about connection. It's about the way that your neurons fire and then the networks that they build around that particular experience that you've had. And so let's say, something happened today. So
Right.
then neurons will fire, right? There'll be a little network that sort of builds around that, and it goes into your short-term memory. And the more you think about that experience, the more you re-experience it, sort of the bigger that network gets, right?
Okay, so one neuron is like, oh my God, I really liked that ice cream. I remember that.
Right.
Then it's kind of like a game of telephone. Hey, let's remember that ice cream. Remember that ice cream. It's like, and that keeps getting told. And the more you tell it to yourself, it solidifies it.
Right. The more you re-experience it, right? The more you think about it. And especially when you get to, so everything you experience essentially goes into short-term memory. But the more you re-experience it, the stronger that connection gets. Then you go and you sort of sleep on it. Your brain then activates chemicals, especially brain-derived neurotrophic factor, that allows networks to build around it, and sort of files it away in the rest of your brain as long-term memory. And everything you experience, like I said, gets made into short-term memory, and that gets really activated in your hippocampus, in this part of your temporal lobe.
Where,
Right?
okay, do the head. Where I'm on your head. So where's the hippo?
In the middle of your temporal lobe,
And then
sort
where's
of on the inside of the brain.
Where's my temporal lobe again?
So like right here.
Okay.
Right? So kind of like in the middle there, you've got this little seahorse-shaped structure called the hippocampus, and that's what's really responsible for short-term memory. And then if the thing that you experienced, if there's a lot of emotion wrapped around that, that's going to make that memory even stronger. So whatever it is, if you have an experience and then you add emotion to it, whether it is a strong positive or strong negative emotion, you're much more likely to remember it.
What about if something that was emotional at the time and then you either forget it, but then maybe if you see a picture of it, I've had this come up lately where I see a picture of it, I'm like, do I remember the event or do I remember me seeing this picture and something happened? So like, what's the difference between a actual memory and maybe me seeing a photo? Does that also constitute a memory? Does it fire it back up, or is that just me remembering a story about the memory?
So it could be both, right?
Yeah.
And so if memories get stronger, the more we re-experience them, the more we think about them. The less we think about them, the less we have experiences associated with it, then that memory starts to sort of break down and starts to fade away. But you still have sort of remnants of it in your brain. And so there can be things that trigger it for you. And it can be a picture, right? But your brain is also very easily fooled. False memories get implanted all the time. This is why eyewitness testimony is freaking horrible.
So what is a false memory? So
meaning that
what does that mean?
Can easily convince you that you've had an experience, because the reality is, if you hear it over and over and over again, to your brain, like, it doesn't even matter if you've actually had that experience, right? You just constantly hear it over. And you know how you have people that you would say like, oh man, they're always lying,
Right.
They're constantly lying.
Yes.
And it's like they believe their own lie. Well, they kind of do. From their perspective, they may not even realize that they're lying at some point.
Yeah.
Right? Because they've told it to themselves so many times. They've created a really great story about it. It's almost like it's happened to them.
Okay, so again, let's go back to the filing system, because I was having this conversation earlier. So something happens to you or to me or to anyone, and it goes into short-term memory that day. And it's competing with all of the other things that happened that day.
Right.
Then when I go to sleep, it like sleep is the kickoff where short-term memory is like, we're going to shut down, but we're going to convert this into long-term memory. And now is it the long-term memory Olympics where everybody competes based on your, it feels like a competition to be like, who's getting a long-term memory? Or you could have like a whole TV show on that. Is that kind of, and then where does it stay? Like, where does it reside?
So it depends on how important that event was to you.
Okay.
Right? Because you're right. There are millions and millions of things every day that compete for our attention.
Right.
And in fact, our subconscious mind essentially records everything. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Our conscious mind, our conscious brain doesn't necessarily do that. It's the things that we focus on, we pay attention to, right? And so, look, I might have had an experience today, but unless I really work hard to think about it, I probably already forgot about it because it wasn't that important. But let's say if I had a traumatic experience today,
Yeah.
oh man, that, because now there's emotion associated with that, that is going to be a very strong memory.
What are the studies on, we'd mentioned in an earlier live stream that, we tell ourselves negative thoughts at a much higher clip. I don't actually, you'll know the percentage, but
Yeah.
at whatever this percentage is better than positive thoughts. So does that mean inherently that our negative memories are more prevalent than our positive memories?
Well, you've got to remember what the primary function of the brain is. The primary function of the brain is to enhance your survival, right?
Oh, I like that.
So it's to enhance your survival. Make sure that you are going to survive. And so
Yeah.
it's really important from the brain's perspective to remember the things that are going to be potentially a threat to you. And a lot of times those are things that we perceive as really negative,
Yeah.
right? I am much more likely to remember if a lion walks into this room, right? That is going to be really scary for me, right? So I'm going to remember that as opposed to if a freaking, like, I don't know, beetle walks into this room.
Wait, isn't that interesting? Like, would you, okay, go to the extremes, right? Like lion, crazy lion wanting to kill you, and like unicorn that rides you off into the sunset, like over a rainbow, like walks into your room and is like, hey, I'm a unicorn, like come jump on me and like ride
Well,
on me.
I think you'd remember both of those things,
But
right?
right, if that extreme, I guess you would. Yeah,
You would
okay.
remember both of those things.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I mean, one is well, they can both be really scary, but one is scary because you're like, oh man, I'm gonna die. The other one might be scary, like,
this is amazing. I'm riding a unicorn.
This is amazing, but yeah, this is weird, right? Unicorns don't exist.
Right. So tell me about how does anyone, if you want to get better at retaining memories, like what are foods, proper sleep, of course you'll say exercise. I'm discovering that exercise is the key to my brain right now.
Yeah.
So like, what are some of the things that I can do to become a better cataloger of my brain?
Well,
of my memories, excuse me.
Yeah, one of the things that people really need to do is that they need to minimize their stress, right? So we're all built for short-term bursts of stress, but long-term chronic stress actually kills neurons, and it kills neurons in the hippocampus. It kills neurons that are responsible for making short-term memory. And so from an evolutionary perspective, right, this is going to make sense because, so I just gave you the example, like if a lion walks in to the room, that's really scary.
I like that I like the lion walking in, kind of, I'm picturing like an actual lion on 2 feet walking in, like, hey, I'm just walking in, not like coming to get you. It's right. Kind of a funnier image. Sorry, lions walking in.
Lion walks in. That is a threat.
Yes.
To my survival, right? So what happens then is that adrenaline goes up, my heart rate starts beating really, really fast, right, to pump blood to my muscles so that way I can run, or I can fight, whatever I need to do. My respiratory rate goes up so that way I'm getting enough oxygen into to my muscles, right? But cortisol also goes up, and cortisol has a pretty important impact on your entire body, but also on your brain. Cortisol wants you to focus on that threat, right? So it wants me to focus on that lion, on everything about that lion. Focus on its posture, where it is, if it's laying, standing, if it looks like it's going to attack, where the exit signs are. In that moment, the only thing that is important is that lion. The actual room that I'm in is not important. Who I'm around is not important. The color of the drapes, not important, right?
Well, it depends. If the lion is staying for dinner and you don't want to have like matching, you can't be too matchy with the lion.
Right, but in general, not important for my survival, right?
Agree.
And so the only thing is that I need to focus on is then that lion. And so in the process, it shuts down my ability to make new memories because all the other stuff is meaningless.
Wow.
Right?
I had never thought of that. So
All the other stuff is meaningless.
I'd
So
never thought about that.
if
Wow.
I survive that lion attack, right, 2 weeks from now, and I'm telling this story to family and friends, and I'm like, listen, this lion came in, this lion looked like this. It
Yeah.
had, its fangs. I don't even know if that's a proper term.
Sure.
It's had a huge mane. Like, I'm telling them the details about this lion, and they're like, well, where exactly were you? And I might say, well, I don't actually remember.
Wow.
Right? Because that was not important at that time. What was important was everything about that lion. And so that's an example of like a short-term stress.
No, it's
right?
a great example. So yeah, go. You're going to say long-term and chronic stress. Sorry.
Right.
Go.
So can you imagine that? You apply that to somebody who's got chronic stress.
Oh.
What does that mean? That means that all they're doing is focusing on the threat, whether that threat is happening in the moment or not. That's all they're focused on. And they're not making new memories. And we see this with people who experience, who've got post-traumatic stress disorder, people who have undergone horrible situations like rape and assaults, various kinds of abuses, is that the focus is always on what they've been through, right? Because that was such a significant threat to them. And it is always there. And so people come to me, who are chronically under stress. And we can argue that, look, everybody is chronically under stress, especially in today's world, right?
Right.
And so we see a lot of people with memory problems. I've seen a lot of people over the last 6 months who were fine 6 months ago and are now having memory problems. And we can discuss whether that is part of the stress response. We can discuss if that's part of depression, because that can make people have some memory problems. But stress kills neurons in the part of the brain responsible for making new memories.
Got it.
Right?
Okay, so that's to answer the earlier question, which is what can we do best to hold on to our memories that really we hold so dear. I mean, we those memories take us through the hard times, right? They keep us safe when, that's a little off. I remember that situation happened. So reducing stress, number one. Got it.
So reducing stress is one of them. So I wouldn't say like
number one.
I wouldn't rank them that way, right?
Got it. Sure.
These are all things that need to get done.
Okay.
Exercise. We always talk about exercise, right? Exercise gives your brain everything it needs to make new neurons and new connections. And what we see is that when people are sedentary, it can actually cause their brains to shrink. It causes neurons not to function properly, right? And a story that I always really like to tell people is, I don't know, have you ever been diving?
Diving, scuba diving? Yes, I have.
Yeah, scuba diving. So if you go scuba diving, you might see like a sea squirt, right? And a sea squirt. A sea squirt is like this.
Is that a character in SpongeBob? I feel like that's a SpongeBob character.
You know what? I've never seen SpongeBob. So I don't
he was down there the last time I was scuba diving. I feel like it was SpongeBob. Okay, sorry, sea squirt. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, so a sea squirt is this invertebrate, right? So when a sea squirt is born, it has a fully functioning brain and spinal cord. And in the first like 12 to 72 hours of its life, the entire purpose of the sea squirt is to swim around and look for the ideal place where it can plop itself down and never have to move again. It will reproduce in that spot. It will eat in that spot for the rest of its life, right? And this really interesting thing happens once a sea squirt plops itself down and stops moving. Its body starts to release chemicals that cause its brain and its spinal cord to start to dissolve. And so over time, what happens is that sea squirt goes from having this fully functioning brain and spinal cord to then having nothing left except this rudimentary little nerve cell. So it's essentially lost its brain and spinal cord, right? God. Because it has not been moving. Here's the really interesting thing about that. We see the same thing happen with people. Maybe not to the extent where you lose everything, but the brain begins to atrophy. The brain begins to shrink when we're sedentary. And exercise gives people everything that the brain needs for the brain to make new neurons and new connections. And even after somebody's had an injury to their brain. Right? And in fact, there are studies that show that people who are starting to exhibit some cognitive issues, some mild dementia or mild cognitive impairment, that if you get them to start walking around, at moderate intensity, 30 to 45 minutes per day,
Yeah.
that their memory will improve.
Wow.
So exercise is really important.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm lifting weights outside of the frame right now as we
You're
speak.
just like doing those
Just
curls.
constantly curling, just constantly curling.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
you
I
know.
got you.
And so when people come to me with memory problems, one of the things I always ask is, well, how do you spend your day?
Yeah.
You know, one of really interesting stories that we get often is that, look, people will move their mother or father from some other country, bringing them to the United States, so that
Yeah.
way, essentially, their parent can babysit their child or their children.
Right.
In their other country, their parent had a life, had people that they interacted with, had activities, belonged to different groups, had gardens, like just had a full life. And they come here, and about 6 months later, they come to see me and they're like, yeah, my mom was fine 6 months ago, and now she's like having memory problems.
Right.
And I'm like, well, what does she do? Well, she spends time with our kids all day. Okay, well, what else does she do? Does she go out? Does she do whatever? And then they're like, well, no, but we try to take her out once a week. I'm like, you take your dog out twice a day.
I was gonna say
Right? Like, you have to get
exactly
people,
what I was thinking. Right.
yeah, it's like you've got to get people moving. People
Yeah.
need to have a purpose in life. You need a reason to get up in the morning, and it's got to be much more than to change your grandkids' diapers.
This is what I love about neurology and some of the work in the brain that you do is there's this real nice mix of purpose and things that you wouldn't think a neurologist. When I think neurologist, I think what you said earlier, which is neuro nerd, right? Neurology nerd.
Yeah.
And it's like if purpose or philosophy would be outside of that, and let's focus on but it really, you tie them in beautifully.
Yeah, the reality is that people who have a purpose, even elderly people who have a purpose, do
Right.
better cognitively than people who don't.
I love
Right?
that.
And
Right.
so it's really important to have a reason to get up in the morning, to have a
Okay.
reason to go about your life.
So reducing stress, exercise, you slid that one in nicely without even putting it as a
Yeah.
point, which is purpose work, right? Having purpose. What else? It really helps
You
memory.
wanna sleep is incredibly important,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
During sleep, so our brains are bathed in fluid, in cerebrospinal fluid, this clear fluid.
Which I learned in a previous live stream. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. And so when we sleep, especially when you start entering the deeper stages of sleep,
Yeah.
your brain starts to clear all the toxins that have built up throughout the day from the work it's done throughout the day. And what studies are now showing is that in deep sleep, that fluid starts to like pulsate, and you see these waves. And it's thought that when the fluid is pulsating, it's actually clearing out the toxins that have built up.
Wow.
Right? And so clears out the toxins during sleep. And also in the deeper stages of sleep is when neuroplasticity occurs. That's when new neurons are being created. That's when connections are being created. That's when whatever you've learned throughout the day, good or bad, is being consolidated into long-term memory. So,
Yeah. Sorry, I want to ask a question now about sleep. I've been around like athletes who are sleeping in chambers where the oxygen is reduced, and other people that are so like, can the average layperson do anything other than like, is there a best sleeping position, or do I have something before I go to sleep, or like, should I put my head on this way on the pillow, or do I need to have somebody massage my head, which I'm all for before sleep? Like, what's the best way to reestablish, like you're saying, establish those neural pathways?
right. So having a really great sleep hygiene routine is really important.
Okay.
So your bedtime routine is incredibly important. And most people have really horrible bedtime routines. They'd much rather pop a pill like melatonin, Benadryl, or some other sleep medicine,
Right.
As opposed to just making some changes in their lifestyle that promotes sleep, right?
Got it. Yeah.
So first of all, the bedroom is not the place to have any electronics. That
Totally
is
agree.
phones,
Except for my
TV.
phone, which is, I really got to get better at that. But I was with you on TV. My phone somehow makes it in. But I'm
Phones,
with you.
TV. I mean, people are on their phones,
In bed.
in bed, trying to fall asleep.
I can't believe those people. How dare
Right.
they? I am not one of them. I'm totally one of them. I'm
But it's
absolutely that
like
guy.
you've got the light from the phone, which is stimulating,
Yeah.
right? And our brains use light as a cue to when it's time to go to sleep. Okay, so your brain makes its own melatonin, and that melatonin gets triggered when the sun starts to go down. But if you're now using artificial light, right, you're sort of delaying that process. Okay, you know, they're going through their Instagram or their emails, which are really stimulating, right? And you
Except
want to
maybe
be
only to watch this video
right.
and other Philippe Douillon live videos. Just saying. Those are
Yeah,
the only things that are
that's
appropriate.
right. And you know what? I did do well, no, that was a podcast. I did a podcast really late because it was just people in Australia. But yeah,
Understood.
yeah.
Understood. Okay,
But
so
yeah, you know,
sleep hygiene,
so sleep
very
hygiene. Take
important.
the electronics out of the bedroom, right? You
Love
want to
that.
start getting your body ready for sleep. And so when it's evening time, maybe you start to dim the lights a little bit in your home, right? Because like we said, your brain relies on light to determine when it's time to sleep and to wake up.
I love that.
You don't want to be eating right before you go to bed. In fact, you want to stop eating 2 or 3 hours before you're going to go to bed, at the very least 2 or 3 hours before, because the digestive process itself can prevent you from going to sleep. Then depending on what you're eating, that may be causing your sugar levels to jump up, which is now stimulating. So you want to make sure that you're eating hours before your last meal, or you're getting ready to go to sleep. You don't want to be drinking anything that's caffeinated right before sleeping. And in fact, right, things like coffee, you know, some studies say you shouldn't drink it. Your last coffee should be 8 hours before going to bed, because caffeine can stay in your system for that period of time.
Yeah.
Right? You want to do things like take warm showers, read books, read something that's going to be really boring, not something that's going to be really stimulating.
Right. Right.
But yeah, so there are these little things that you can just do in your own lifestyle that are going to be better than taking medications, because in the long term, medications can interfere with the deeper parts of sleep where neuroplasticity occurs.
Is there a certain temperature that is good for sleeping? Like you can adjust your temperature in your, is it hotter, colder, or?
Yeah, I think to have it a little bit cooler for some reason helps people fall asleep in the room. Although I always feel like if it's warmer, I'm going to fall asleep. So
I do.
think,
I feel very womb-like when it's warm. I'm like, my inner child comes out. Okay.
Yeah, so look, I think people need to, you know, people know themselves the best.
Yeah.
And so they need to sort of figure out what's going to work best for them in terms of the temperature. But taking warm showers helps to relax your muscles, helps to calm your mind, right? So that's really important. Meditating right before you're about to go to sleep can be really, really great.
I hope everybody's writing this down for me, because I need to do all of these.
Yeah.
So wait, let me ask you, so that's now a little bit of the how to improve, you know, those neural pathways around sleep. So while we're sleeping, what is happening on this world of short-term to long-term memory conversion, and where does it then go? Where does it go?
So long-term memory gets placed essentially everywhere. The connections in your brain, I mean, everything's connected to everything. And so when you are going to sleep, your body is releasing chemicals like brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is the chemical that we associate the most with neuroplasticity. And so that's when connections are being made. That's when it's kind of like, oh, you know, the US Open is on. The US Open tennis final is on, right? And it's kind of like, oh, maybe it's going to get put in that tennis file, because in my mind, I'm comparing it to previous US Opens or the Australian Open earlier this year, or, you know, other matches. And so it gets filed away sort of in that area. But all these connections are, you know, are pretty complicated. So even when we say, oh, this part of the brain is responsible for this, you know, if I say, look, your right frontal lobe has an impact on the strength in your left leg, right? That's very much true, but everything is connected. Everything is connected.
My right frontal lobe is correlated to the strength in my left leg.
Yeah, you know, when we see people have strokes, if they got a stroke in their frontal lobe, oftentimes they'll have weakness in the opposite lower extremity.
Oh my God, this is so go back to the lion example, just if I will.
Yeah.
You said cortisol jumps up, right?
Yeah.
So what is the natural competitor to cortisol? Like if cortisol is going up, we're more stressed, right? So what is the balancer for cortisol that we can either release in addition to lowering our cortisol? What is our other part?
So I don't know if cortisol has sort of like a, a
Yeah,
competitor.
a natural
Yeah, but I would
opposite,
say that,
sure.
look, all of these things are floating around in our system, you know? It's just whether if they're sort of elevated or not,
Yeah.
right? And when they're elevated, if they're elevated for a short period of time, then it's fine.
Hmm.
But when they're elevated for a long period of time, I mean, high levels of cortisol, which is a steroid,
Yeah.
weakens your immune system, right? Causes your bones to become brittle,
Jeez.
causes weight gain. Um, so long term, it has a significant impact on different areas of the body. And so
Got it.
it's really important that we do a much better job of minimizing our stress.
I have, it's funny you mentioned the stress one. I feel like maybe pretty good, but I feel like I can be even better. The breathing, I think the breathing is going to be a big one. I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
So let me ask you, it gets into long-term memory, and
Mhm.
then how do I pull it out? Like, why do I think something that I seemingly has happened to me that was, I would deem emotional? I
Yeah.
slept well, it was emotional at the time, slept well, went to long-term memory, and somebody asks me years later, and I'm like, maybe I kind of, but then something weird will pop out and be like, I do remember this thing that's not even closely related to that. It's almost like it's a bit off. It's never the one I actually think I should be remembering.
Yeah. So why is it like some random thing will pull it out?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's about the way that you've made those associations, those connections in your brain, right? And
Yeah.
the reality is, if you're not thinking about it on a regular basis, you're going to
It'll go,
weaken that
it'll
network.
go away. Right.
Yeah, it's just like, it's like a language. If there's a language
Mm,
you learned as a kid, but you haven't really practiced that language, it's kind of still always there,
yeah.
but now it's going to take a lot of work for you to be able to speak it. You essentially have to relearn it, but you're going to be much more ahead than somebody who never knew that language to begin with, right?
Right. Right.
Because you've got those connections. It's just really, really weak.
Got it. And what happens when so fast forward now, we're remembering things and we're doing memories. What happens when you're, either you have dementia, or if someone, if you have a family member who's suffering from memory loss, like what's actually happening in the brain that's not connecting from long term, even for maybe basic things, name, for, I told you that one time I couldn't remember my social security number or stuff like that. So like,
Yeah.
what's happening there?
So when people have dementia, remember we started this conversation off talking about Salvador Dali and his
Yes,
paintings, the persistence of memory versus the disintegration of the persistence of memory. And
great
so
title.
memory is all about connection,
Mm,
right? And when people are now developing dementia, there is now disconnection occurring for whatever reason.
mm,
And so in something like Alzheimer's disease, right, which is a
mm,
form of dementia and happens to be the most common type of dementia, the things that are causing the breakdown in connection between neurons are the formation of different kind of proteins. There are proteins accumulating inside the cell, which we call neurofibrillary tangles that are preventing the neuron
mm.
from getting the nutrients that it needs to function properly. And
Right.
then there are proteins accumulating in between neurons that we call amyloid plaques that are preventing neurons from communicating with each other. And so there's
Mm,
disconnection happening, right? And anything that's going to cause any structural change to the brain is causing disconnection to some degree,
mm.
right? So vascular dementia, which is when people have high blood pressure and diabetes, and that's causing a lot of little strokes or causing just damage to the brain because different areas of the brain are not getting enough blood flow.
Right.
That's causing disconnection between neurons. Neurons are not able to function properly, right? Strokes, again, strokes are causing, um, they're causing a structural change in the brain. That's causing disconnection between neurons. So
Right.
memory is about connection. Dementia, in whatever form, is about disconnection for whatever reason.
Got it. Let's do this. I want to change it up a little bit. Let's get a little fun, a little memory fun. So what's your during your studies to become
Yeah.
a neurologist? Do you have a favorite memory about being a neuro nerd, or something that jumps
Oh
out to
man,
you of like,
favorite memory.
yeah, just about, on your path. here to become a neurologist?
Let's see. I mean, I would say it's always about the people that you're like serving, the people that you get to work with,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, your colleagues, if you've got a good batch of people, they sort of make it fun, right? And you get to learn in a really fun environment. And then
Yeah.
I feel like as a doctor, you learn so much more from your patients than they probably ever learned from you, right? I mean, their stories or allow me to make certain connections and to learn in that way and to be inspired by who they are and how they've never given up. And so I think the best memories are always around people. And sometimes, they're kind of funny, right? They shouldn't,
No, well,
they shouldn't be funny, but they're kind
no,
of
but
funny, right?
does comedy help lock in memories because it's a
Yeah,
heightened
yeah,
emotion,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely. I mean, emotions are incredibly important for everything, even when you see people like, go out on a date and, you see somebody go out on a boring date and you're like,
Mm.
man, that's because you don't understand how the brain works. Like if you
Hey,
really wanted to work out with that
right.
person, you need that date to be exciting,
Exactly. I
right?
agree with you.
You need that dopamine to go up in the person's brain and to make that connection to you. You
Sounds
need
like,
the memory to be strong
yeah,
and to
there's
make that connection to
the
you.
Inlay Brain Fit Institute dating site is
That's,
coming soon, I feel.
yeah, it'll be better than eHarmony,
Oh,
right?
exact brain harmony, whatever you want to call it. Date your brain type. I can see it now. Something
Yeah,
like that.
I mean,
I'm not a bad idea. Oh,
look,
we got a little heart. We got a little heart from that. Why not?
yeah, it's all about everything about the way we go about our lives is really about how our brains are interpreting the experiences that we're having.
Yeah, yeah. What do you have an earliest memory? So I've been asked this multiple times, and
Yeah,
I've so I'm asking you. Do you have an earliest memory? And
my earliest memory, I was probably about 3 or 4. I
okay,
was in preschool, and I hated going to preschool. Like I hated being away from my parents, and so
right,
like I was always crying, and at the end of the day, I would always hide underneath this desk, crying for my
yeah,
parents.
yeah, yeah.
And clearly that was traumatic for me as a kid. And so I remember that because it was a trauma. There was a lot of
Trauma, yeah,
emotion associated with that, right?
right,
I mean,
right.
I don't really remember most things, from when I was like, I don't remember anything else from when I was less than 5,
Yeah.
you know?
So what is the earliest memory that, people could, I mean, have that you've heard of, that's, I don't want to say that's to be believed, but have you ever heard of somebody saying, I can remember in utero? Is that a thing, or is that
Well, I've
crazy?
never heard anybody say that.
Okay.
Um,
Just checking,
I've never heard
You never
anybody
know.
say that. However,
Yes.
you will have kids who
Yeah.
can recount something that happened long before they were born.
Okay. What do you
And
mean? Say more. Like how old? Get specific.
like
Like
they'll be like 5, 6, or 7 years old,
okay.
and they'll talk about it like it happened to them. And
Hmm.
a lot of people believe it's like it's a past life experience that they had, and that they are remembering at that young age. And then usually they sort of
Interesting.
grow up and they don't remember it anymore.
Okay, so
Um,
now dig
right.
into
So,
this. Dig into that because you're basically telling me that this is the opposite of what I thought, right? So I was thinking neurology is this, it's science, and now you're telling me through
well,
science that there's a possibility of a past life. I'm not,
listen,
hey,
I don't think we have all the answers when it
of
comes to
course,
science,
of
right? We
course,
don't
yeah,
have all the answers to things, and people have experiences that are unexplainable.
it's
But that
amazing,
doesn't mean that you discount them,
of course,
right? And enough people have had these experiences where you're just kind of like, okay, like I'm not going to sit here and argue with you about an experience that you had because that does nothing for our relationship, right?
yeah,
Because part of being your doctor is that we need to have a relationship where we can be very honest with each other, where you can tell me what you think is causing your health issues, what you think will help your health issues, and we can kind of work together on it. I always tell people, look, when I may be an expert on the brain, but you're the expert on you. So when I am working with you. It's two experts coming together to help you solve a problem, to help you get healthier. And
Right.
so discrediting the experiences people have don't allow you to get to that place.
Agree. I'm fascinated that I might have had a former life. I'm loving
Yeah, I
that
mean,
fact.
look, I have no idea, right? But there are people who strongly believe in past lives.
But I think as adults, I'm skeptical as an adult. But if you tell me a 5-year-old is telling you something that they have no business knowing, but
Yeah.
there is something there.
And
I'm
then like
buying
you
it.
go into the history books and you look and you're like, well, this thing actually happened. How does this person know this?
I actually
Right?
think they were all in the Umbrella Academy. If you've seen that show, I'm
I
not
have
going to
not
give it
seen it.
away for you. Please watch the Umbrella Academy. I do not work for Netflix, but that show is great.
Yeah.
So what else about memory? Like I could probably we could talk about this more, but like what's it when we think about our memories, and I think the big one I'm finding is as I get older, I want to hold on to those. They almost
Yeah.
carry me. So
Right.
what are some of the things like how do you go about creating great memories, not just ones that are fun in the moment, but that you really think will last with those that you care about?
Have really great experiences. Highly
Experiences, yeah.
emotional, highly charged, wonderful experiences with people. Have new experiences. Right?
Yeah.
That allows your brain to create new neurons and new connections. You know, the saying that we are creatures of habit, being
Hmm.
creatures of habit is killing our neurological potential, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like you're not challenging your brain in any way. So you want
Yeah.
to have these incredible experiences. And the reality is that memories define our lives.
Yeah,
Memories, right?
Philippe, great question from Ace to Ice here. Is it possible to recover memories that were lost due to trauma or illness? Awesome question.
So it depends, right? Because in order for you to have a memory, you first need to learn that thing. And
Mm,
so oftentimes people will have, like you ever hear somebody who had like a car accident, but they don't actually remember what happened? Well, they never
yeah,
learned it, right? And that actually serves a purpose. There are certain traumatic things that your brain does not want you to remember, right? It's like a repressed sort of memory. It
yeah,
doesn't want it to be, it's so traumatic that it doesn't want it to be um, brought to your consciousness, right?
right,
But let's say this is
right.
something that you knew really well and now you've had an illness or an injury to the brain. Well, maybe you
Hmm.
caused some disconnection to the network where that memory was being stored. And so that's something that may be very difficult to get back because you
Hmm.
actually caused a structural change in your brain through either illness or injury.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great question, Ace. Thank you so much. Let me ask you. I was watching Elon Musk's, neuro. I think
Oh,
it's
the Neuralink.
Neuralink, right?
Yeah, the Neuralink.
So he's got his mask on. It looks incredibly dystopian, the whole thing. People, and he's saying, and there's this TV show I think called Upload, right? So we're saying uploading of your memories could
Yeah.
be, so basically I go in somewhere, I put a cap on, I'm downloading my memories somewhere. They live then in the cloud or wherever, and then you could technically download those into a cybernetic organism or some body or something where my memories live. Talk about what you know of this world of like memories that are in my human form that then are extracted and can go outside of my human form into and actually be memories and retain their shape and not just, code, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, a lot of the work that Elon Musk does, especially with Neuralink, the technology is actually not new technology. It's just being applied in a very different way. So,
Hmm.
what he's using for Neuralink, it's very similar to the technology that we use in people who have epilepsy, where we
Hmm.
implant devices, we use a little electrical signal to see if we can stop the seizures once the seizures are being detected. And so he's just applying that technology a little bit differently. Yeah. Have you seen Harry Potter? Have you seen the movies?
Listen, I am completely Gryffindor, 100%.
Yeah.
Yes, so I'm in.
So you
I
know when
can't
like
wait to go to the wizarding school. So yes.
you know when Dumbledore uses his wand to take out a memory and put it in his like thing.
Ah,
Yeah.
of course I know.
I
Yes.
don't think we're anywhere near there yet.
Is it
So
because you're saying Dumbledore is not alive, potentially? Because he exists. I know he's around, but
I think, look, our technology is just not there. And I don't know if we ever wanted to get to that place, right?
yeah,
Because if
yeah.
we already know that people's memories are easily manipulated. Like, what are we going to do if we're able to actually upload them into something else? I don't even know if that's even possible at any
Right.
point, right? Because this discussion of, well, where do memories live? And I'm kind of like, well, they kind of live all over in these really
This is,
complex network. How are you going
I
to
think,
access that?
I think that was my original, when you said that, I guess I had just assumed that memories were like, I don't know, I'm thinking like a filing system, like
Yeah.
socks in a drawer or something. But you're saying it's almost like it really is a cloud computing. So when I go like this and I remember it kind of comes from all these different areas to become something. It's nothing until it's something.
Yeah, and the reality is that our brains are the most complex computers on this planet.
Yeah,
Far more
brains.
efficient,
Suck it, computers.
faster than
Brains are better.
any, man-made computer that there is.
Yeah,
And our technology is just not anywhere close to that.
yeah. Oh, hey, Rebecca Batterman, my friend, good seeing you. Hi. Rebecca asks, why do we remember some things and not others?
Well, like we said, it depends on how emotionally charged that event was, right? If something is very emotionally charged, you're much more likely to remember it. But on the flip side of that, there are certain traumatic things that your brain does not want you to remember, right? And we see that often. We
Yeah.
see that in people, like we said, who've experienced significant trauma.
What's going on great question, Rebecca, thank you. What's going on with, the times when you say, like, it wasn't supercharged emotional moment, but it might have been important to you, like you're at a concert and like the lead singer's like, hey man, like maybe that is emotional, but some like randomy thing, you're like, I'll remember a look, or I'll
Yeah.
remember you'll say that to someone. It wasn't maybe heightened emotion, but maybe it was so emotional, but just in a different type of emotion. Is it something
Yeah, but it
there?
was something that was still very important to you,
Important to you. So it's really
right?
based on what's important to you.
Yeah,
Got that.
absolutely.
Got that.
And then you start making different associations with that thing, right? So it becomes not just that the lead singer sort of looked at you, but they pointed to you, they
Yeah.
gave you a wink, right?
Yeah.
Like there's this whole narrative around that you're building the network around
Yeah.
because it was
Hey,
so important to you.
I went to a Tool concert when I was in high school, and I wasn't a big Tool fan. I was wearing like super tight white jeans and like construction boots. I was stuck out like a sore thumb.
With the
Uh,
mustache or without the mustache?
no, high school I did not have the mustache.
Got it.
And he was like 2 hours late, and I'll never forget just him showing up, just like to this, just like walking on stage, this long hair. He has a tattoo of his spine down his spine, and I was like, this is like the coolest moment ever. It just I didn't know I was going to remember that, but that image stays with me. And I didn't plan it. It just happened to me in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. But again,
Fantastic.
it's an important emotionally charged event for you, right?
Yeah. Well,
And
yeah, go. Sorry.
no, I was gonna say, and that may not be the case for somebody else, but it's important to you, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. Well, this has been an emotionally charged event for me tonight. And I think with that, we can log off and
Yeah.
say good night for now. We'll no longer be live, but thanks for everybody for joining. And dude, it is always so great to see you. Like, I
You
feel like
too.
I'm learning daily more about my brain, and it's honestly having ramifications outside of my life, just learning about the brain. I came into these conversations with you like, great, here's a smart neurology guy. I'm going to ask him a lot of questions. Let's just talk neurology. And it's really affected so much more. So just big thanks to you, man.
Oh, well, thank you. This is always awesome. It's always a lot of fun. You get me to think about things in different ways. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, we're going to keep doing it. So tune in, live people.
Yeah.
Okay, can I say that? Can I say that? I just said it. It's
Yeah,
happening.
I mean, you said it. So,
It
yeah.
just happened. I hope
Yeah.
you remember it. Maybe
Yeah.
not. Maybe you can
Yeah.
forget it.
I think the headset
The head,
is emotionally. I'm gonna remember the headset.
this is all basically Neuralink. I'm being uploaded to my own
That's
consciousness
right.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Ooh.
have a great Sunday night. Best to your family and best. Oh, thank you, Rebecca. Thanks, Ace to Ice. And we'll be doing these usually every Sunday. We're on doing these, so we're trying to pull these off once a week. And I think we're going to do them for as long as we can.
Yep, sounds good. Awesome.
Okay. Have a great night.
You too. Take care.
See you, buddy.